Hey, g'day guys, it's Adam from VideoShowMeHow, and in this video we are continuing the build on the DMAX. And if you've been following for a little while, you'll know that we've kind of installed all the heavy stuff. We've got our winch, bar work, lights, sliders, etc, etc. And that can only mean one thing. We are on to putting our suspension lift into the beast. I am super excited about this. We've gone with Outback Armour. We are going to get stuck into installing this into this. Excited about this one. Let's get started. Now, for the guys that follow the channel regularly, you'll know that I've been looking for a lift kit for some time, and I've been researching the heck out of all the options that are out on the market. This is not a sponsored video or anything like that. I paid for these out of the Video Show Me How coffers. Super skinny, teeny tiny coffers, but coffers nonetheless. So what we'll do is we'll pull all of the goodness out of the boxes here. We'll lay it all out so we can see what we get. If you do want to skip ahead though, and you're on YouTube, check out the chapters down below and you can skip ahead straight to the install. Oh, stubby cooler. So here we are, here's everything all laid out, and there's a couple of different reasons why I went with Outback Armour themselves. The first one is that they have all in-house engineering. I was lucky enough to get over there and do a factory tour. They are located in Brisbane in Australia, and the setup they have over there is pretty awesome. All their warehousing and what have you is located there as well. They had shock dynos and everything all lined up so that as they're assembling these bits and pieces and manufacturing it, every single one of these is tested separately and checked off. They test all the individual tensile strengths individually. They pull everything apart and make sure that everything is up to spec. And it was pretty cool to see. They had some vehicles in there that they had up on hoists and bits and pieces, testing new gear and new setups to keep advancing that R&D. They even had some setup there that they were testing for the Texas police over in the States, because Outback Armour started as military. They were fitting out armor-plated vehicles and that kind of thing, so they kind of know their stuff. And I like the idea that they're bringing that know-how, that tech into our world and building a product that is absolutely bulletproof. Now, as far as what I've gone with their adjustable range. That gives you some extra flexibility in the fact that all of these shocks have an internal bypass. And what that means is you've got 20 settings of clicks, or 20 clicks, 20 settings of adjustability that you can dial in or out, so you can firm up the shock or you can soften it right up. And that's really helpful depending on the type of driving that you're doing. So you might need some extra firmness, some extra control. You're towing and you really want to dial that up. Maybe you want to turn it right back down. You're doing some really soft trails and you want to really soften up the ride. It gives you that flexibility, which is pretty cool. Some of the other stuff that I thought was awesome with the kit, new bushes there. We've got new ubolts, all of that sort of stuff, which should be standard. These are our shackles for the rear. You'll see a little bit later, and everything is greaseable. Really, really important in my book. And then I've also gone with their Jouce kits. And what these are is effectively a replacement for the existing hard bump stops that sit in most four-wheel drives. If you've ever experienced that, you'll know what I'm talking about, where you've gone through a washout or a whoop or something on the beach or off-road, and you've maybe been going a little bit too fast and you get that real thump, that real bang in the front end or on the rear. That's what's actually happening. The factory ones that we'll look at a little bit later are just a solid bit of rubber, and what will happen is it actually contacts normally on your chassis or your control arm, and that's what's happening. It's literally just banging on that full force. And why these Jouces are different is, one, they're hollow, as you can see, hello. And why that's cool is it allows these to be progressive in the way that they dampen. These being hollow, it allows that stop to happen progressively. So when you are at that full suspension compression, this is going to contact, but it's going to contact progressively. It's going to hit there, and as it comes down, it's soft at the top and then harder and harder as it gets to the bottom. So when you are hitting those washouts and what have you, it's going to smooth out that ride dramatically. But anyway, enough jibber jabber. Let's get cracking on installing our new suspension into the DMAX. All right, so step number one is to get your tape measure. And the reason why we want to get our tape measure is we want to get some measurements. Now we're going to get two. We're going to go from the ground to the lip of the guard, so I can give you guys a bit of an idea of, with all the gear that's on this, what the setup is going to end up with and how high it is at the end. But when you're measuring your suspension, you want to go from the middle of your hub to the guard. And the reason why you do that is so that it doesn't take your tires into account. So here's our first measurement. I've two-handed it. We're right on the M there in the middle of the hub, and we can see there that we're right on that 490 mark on the underneath of the guards. And then our overall measurement from the bottom to the top, we are coming in right at about that 880 mark there. So that's our overall height at the moment with all the gear that we have on. let's see what kind of difference we see at the end. Now we're going to get started on the front end of the DMAX. We're going to do that lift first. You're going to need a couple of things to make sure everything stays nice and safe. You're going to need a jack to be able to get the DMAX up off the ground. We want the wheels off, obviously, to be able to get in there. Don't just rely on that guy though. You do need a set of axle stands to support the load, and then a set of wheel chocks. That's always important. I recommend using those anytime you're jacking anything in the air. But for us, most importantly, when we have the rears up and the rears off the ground, that's our handbrake. So we want to be able to chock our front to make sure the DMAX doesn't go off wandering by itself. Now your jack can go on the side here on the chassis rail, so we can lift it up one side at a time. You can then put your axle stand just in there on the nice flat section of the chassis. So there might look like there's a lot going on here, but there's not as much to remove as you might think. We just need to make a little bit of room down the bottom here to be able to take the strut out, and we're gonna eject it out of the bottom. Now before we go undoing anything here though, I would recommend getting yourself all nice and set up like you can see here. Use your penetrating fluid of your choice. I've just got some of the WD stuff here, and it's well worth giving a squirt to the bolts before you go to take them off. The first thing we're gonna wanna remove is our wheel speed sensor here. This is what runs down to the back of our hub here. And we have a couple of brackets that we want to get out of the way. It's really important that we don't put a lot of strain on this or our brake line. So we just want to remove them. So bracket number 1 here, this is a 12 mil. We just need to remove that one. And then snaking up the top here, this guy here is a 10 mil. So we just need to remove both of those. So once we're nice and loose and slack there, our next step is to get to our sway bar. So we have our sway bar link just here. We need to get to our sway bar bolt, this guy just here, our nut on the end. We need to undo that. And then our actual bushes here as well that connect it to the chassis. So there's one nut there, there's another nut up under here. We need to drop both of those off, and the whole sway bar can just sort of sit down. You need to do the same on the other side as well, on the driver's side, so that the whole sway bar is loose, and that's going to give us the clearance we need to drop our strut out. Now the third thing that we need to remove is our ball joint nut. So this is our upper control arm here and the upper ball joint. This is our nut here. There is a cotter pin that sits in here, so just grab some of your long nose, needle nose pliers that look a little bit like that. Something like that's going to do the job. And then what we want to do is use your pliers to bend our little tab here down and around so you can pull the whole pin out. And it should come out looking a little bit straight, just like that. And once the cotter pin's out, a bit of penetrating fluid, then grab your 22 mil socket. You want to chuck that on there and undo it almost all the way. Just leave it just connected on a few threads. Now this one is going to be borderline maniac tight, so you want to be using the longest breaker bar you've got to make your life easy. Remember to go the right way though, a lefty-loosey in our instance. On the passenger side we are here, we're pushing this one that way. And remember, you want to just keep a couple of threads on here. Don't want to take it all the way off. The reason for that is we need to shock this loose. So that's where you need to grab your little BFH, and then just in there, right on the side here, you want to give it a couple of good, short, hard whacks, and this will pop loose. So that's why we want to keep that nut on there, so it catches this, and now we can take it off nice and safely. Just grab your jack that's there just for safety, reposition it up underneath the ball joint here, the bottom ball joint. Just add some tension so that this is nice and secured, and when you undo this bolt, nothing goes crashing down and everything's nice and safe. Now once you're at this point, that's all you need to undo, would you believe it? You're pretty well ready to go to now start unbolting the strut. That's our next step. Penetrating fluid down the bottom here, undo this big guy down there, and then similarly for our 3 bolts at the top, 1, 2, and another one at the back. We just want to undo all of those so our shock is nice and loose. Now once you're at this point, you've got the top 3 off, you've got your strut out there and everything else done, you're ready to pull this out. It's definitely a two-handed job. You essentially want to get this pulled up and over that lip. You can then drop it down our little hole here, and that will enable you to slot it and wiggle it all out so we can get ready to put in our shiny and new upgraded shock. Now in prepping this guy to go into its new home, a couple of things we need to do. 1, take our nuts off there. 2, grab a little bit of your red Loctite. We want to put just a dab on the threads of these, and then we're just sort of doing what we did when we took it out. You just want to thread this up and through, line our studs up here so that they go through, and then we can start tightening it into place. And there we go, we are in, we are all nice and lined up there. It's helpful if you get one of these lever tools or something like that. You can just kind of get in there and lever so you've got the hole in the right position there. It may be a bit tight, you can give it a couple of gentle taps. It is important to note on the bottom nut when we put that in, we don't want to fully tighten that. That just needs to be hand tight for the moment. We need to get everything done here on the front end and the car down on its tires under its own weight, so the suspension is settled and in the right spot before we go torquing these guys down. Right, so there we go. We have our strut all in, all connected. The next step from here is just reversing what we did before. We want to start putting everything back together. Start with your upper ball joint. We need to sort of two-hand that, push that down and push that up at the same time. Get that one in. Start reconnecting your sway bar. Once you've done the other side, get the two in there and on this side as well, and then start connecting it up to its mounting spot here on the frame. So that is your front strut all done. Now for us, we are replacing our factory bump stops here with our new Jouce stops. So to remove these guys, you need to either get a monster set of multi-grips. These are too small. I'm resorting to a pipe wrench because these guys are a screw on. So you want to just get something clamped around there, and then it is a lefty-loosey scenario to screw this guy out so we can get our new ones put in place. There's our factory one. You can see that is just solid rubber there, and that's what's going to give you that big whack sound. So we want to get our nice new Jouce stops, which are these guys here. Now there's a couple of different options. You can see that we have this little cup, and even further than that, you do have a washer. So if you want to space these guys out and you want to use these, then that's your call. Because obviously the closer this is to the control arm, the earlier it's going to engage. So I'm going to go middle of the road. I'm just going to use our cup here and have our new Jouce stop sitting in there like that. It is a bit of a combo kit for us. You're going to need to use one of these if you are installing it on the DMAX. One side goes through into our new bump stop and screws in place like that. That's now ready to install. And you can see where we're going with this. This guy just needs to screw into place of where our factory bump stop used to live. Now when you tighten this up, you'll see that there is this lip here, the flat section, that needs to face out towards your tyres. So this doesn't need any spanners or anything, just get it nice grip on here and get it nice and tight. From here, before you put that tyre back on, I recommend you leave this now, go over to the other side, do the same thing so that the driver's side in our case is done as well. And then when the other side is done, tyres back on here, we can then get our jack everything back up, remove the stands and see how it sits. So there we go, we are back on the ground. We're back on our own two front wheels, and check it out. There is definitely a bit more room in the front. That is looking awesome. That is looking awesome. Pretty pumped. We want to move on to the rear of this thing. So for us, flicking me around, reversing him in, and then let's get cracking on the rear. Right, so we've got the DMAX reversed in and we're ready to go to get our rear suspension all installed. From here, what we need to do is get our jack up underneath the diff there. We want to jack this guy up just enough that we can fit our jack stands up underneath the chassis so that our diff is then resting on our floor jack altogether. We can go up and down as we need. And then once you're at this point, you've got your jack stands sitting underneath the chassis rail there. We can rip the tires off. We can put them underneath our chassis rails themselves for some extra safety. And then we can get started on removing our shock and leaf spring. So once everything is all off, all exposed under here, ready to go, there's only a couple of bolts that need to be done here. We have our U-bolts here and here, and there are 4 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, up underneath that sit here. We need to undo those. And then we have our little toothpick, our rear shock here that needs to be taken off to be upgraded to some beef. We have our top nut up the top and then another guide that lives just down the bottom. And once they're undone, we need to come in under the back here. You can see here's our shackle here. We just need to get a 19mm socket on there, remove that bolt, and we should be able to push out our leaf spring. From there, we just need to do exactly the same thing down the front end here, 19 there again. And then before you go removing the last bolt, so you can remove the leaf spring overall, this here is your handbrake cable. There is a 12mm just sitting up in there. You just need to remove that because we're going to space this out, and you can go ahead, remove the last of this main bolt here, and we should be able to lift all of the leaf spring up and out. Now to put the bushes into the ends of your leaves, it is super simple. You don't need presses or anything like that to push these guys in because they are a 2-parter. So you just want to get the short stubby guys, a pair of those goes into the big end, and then a pair of the shorter, skinnier, stubbier versions. These guys go in the other end of the leaf spring. Now installation grease is included. It's just a moly version. You don't want to go overboard with coating the heck out of this thing. All you're looking for is just like toothpaste really, so squish it down the end, and then you're only after just a little bit just on there like that. and then you just want to smear it all the way around. Just a little bit like that is going to be plenty. You want to do that on each of the bushes, and then these just push into place just like that. Then the final part on this end, once you've done all of your joints, is to grab our little inner sleeves here like this. They need a little bit of the grease there as well, because these guys are going to sit inside this bushing here, and it just gives that extra bit of strengthening when you tighten this down. It's giving something to torque against. And there we go. We are all set and ready to roll. We've got our greased new nice neophene bushes in here, and then we've got our crush sleeve in the middle. So do the same thing on our second leaf pack, and we are ready to get these installed. So the next step is to start to install our new greaseable shackles. So this guy just needs to come out. So similar to how we just pulled it off our shaft here, we need to pull our shaft out of this side as well. Then just get up under here with a flathead and rip these rubber bushes out. We want to then get some grease onto the replacement blue neophene bushes and put those into place. So there we go, we've got our new shackle in place. You just got to slide it in through your bushings here. Here's our nice new neophenes. Once it is there, just position it in such a way that you can easily hook up your new leaf pack, and then from there, you just need to lug it so it sits on our little center section there. Slot it in our little front section there, and then we're ready to start bolting it all into place. And once our shackle is all on here from the rear, we just need to get our main plate here. That sits on there just like that. Just got to push it on nice and even so it goes on properly. There we go, just like that. Then from there, washer, lock washer, and none. Just want to torque that by hand, then just a few nips up with the ratchet. Same as before on the front, we don't want to torque this to full spec until we're back on our tyres and the suspension is at right height. And then same story on the front here, we want to get our new greaseable pin pushed all the way through. Recommend having the grease nipple facing outwards. It just makes pumping some grease into this a whole lot easier. Now from here, we're almost home free. We have our new Jouce Stop here. That needs to sit just over there, just over the little bolt here on the new leaf spring. We then grab our nice new U-bolts here. They sit over the top there just as we removed it, and this guy sits underneath just like that. U-bolt, U-bolt, bolt, bolt. And then once we have everything all in place just like that, we have our new Jouce tube, we have our new U-bolts all ready to go. We want to grab a 22mm, ideally a rattle gun or an ugga, and we want to tighten these U-bolt bolts right up. These need to be super tight. Then our final step around the back here, we just need to undo our top bolt here for our little matchstick. We then need to replace that guy with the aftermarket Outback Armour shock. Now just on the U-bolts, it is recommended that these guys are rechecked and retorqued after about the first full tank of fuel. Now for the DMAX, obviously that's about 1700 kilometers. For everyone else, about 500 Ks. You want to just torque those so that they stay super tight. So that is our next step now. This side is all done. We need to rinse and repeat on that side, so we can then get our tyres back on and put it back down to right height. There's only a few things left to do. The first thing is to torque all of our bolts. So everything that we didn't torque there before, we need to get under and tighten everything up. The other thing you want to do is you want to come under to where your ABS line is, which is this guy here running around. We want to then get our little spacer. This is that little tube you'll see in the bolt packet. We want to space this up. So you can see this is our ABS line here. This is our little spacer. So just a 10mm socket, lift that guy up and replace the bolt with the one that comes included in the kit. Then the other thing we need to do is our handbrake cable as well. Outback Armour give us a whole bunch of different options on the end plate here. You can see the natural line of the handbrake cable running up there. So the one that fits for the DMAX is this far corner. So the inner corner facing the rear is the right one. So you just want to bolt the handbrake cable back into place. And the last thing we need to do while we're under here is with our shackles themselves, we now have greaseable shackles. So while you're under here, grab your grease gun, and then we want to make sure that each of these is pumped full of grease. Keep pumping the grease in until you just see the grease come out the sides of the bushes. You'll see that on both sides of the shackle. Once you've got that oozing out, you know you're good to go. Give it a bit of a wipe up and a tidy up so you don't get the dirt sticking to it and that kind of thing. Repeat on the other side and we are good to go. Now once we're at this point, there is only one thing left to do before we get out the measuring tape and start getting some final measurements and some final adjustments, and that is to get a wheel alignment. It's really important that the wheel alignment is done ASAP and you don't go driving around any more than you need to. You will have some gnarly angles going on at the front there and you will scrub out your tyres pretty pretty quickly if you don't get that done. So that's the next step for me. I'm gonna take this down now. We're gonna get our wheel alignment done, and then from there, we'll get this out in the open. We'll have a bit of a look around. We'll get the tape on it to get some measurements and see how it's all turned out. I can't wait to see what the DMAX looks like all sorted. For me, it's gonna be a couple of hours, but for you, it will be in 3, 2, 1. And there we go, all aligned. Check that out. I reckon that looks absolutely awesome. I'm a big fan. You can see we've definitely gone up a little bit in the guards. We're all aligned. Got a little bit more weight to go in the back there, so we're probably sitting a little bit high at the back at the minute. We still need this to sort of bed in, and it's going to drop a little bit more as it settles down after we do some kilometers on it. From here, the next steps really are just doing about that 500 Ks, then retorquing everything, particularly the rear leaf springs. We will see this drop and settle in height. Now, if we grab our tape, we can do a bit of a measure and see what kind of difference, what kind of height increase we've got from the Outback lift. So from the center of the hubcap there to the top of the guard, we're coming in right at about that 570 mark. And from the ground, to give you that overall idea of how high this thing is, it comes in at that 950. So overall, I am stoked with that. I think we have got the perfect amount of lift. We've got about that 50 mil mark, I think, by the time you calculate how much the front had sagged with all the extra bits we've got on the front. So overall, absolutely love the way that it looks and is all set up now. I think that height-wise is pretty much perfectly suited for what I'm going to be using the truck for. It looks the business as well. So much so, I feel a montage coming on. So let's roll that B-roll and check out the DMAX. Now with the suspension in, that does represent the end of this build. Well, the end of this part of the build. The idea was we'd be able to get a really firm baseline and a great truck to be able to sort of do everything as well as looking awesome. You know, we've got bits on here, we can see in the dark, we can go underwater, we can go through mud, we've got all the bits so we can tackle some tough tracks, but we've still got the flexibility that we can do some weekend warrior stuff on the weekends as far as, you know, renos and bits and pieces like that, but also tow and in general get out there and enjoy what nature has to offer. But never fear, stage 2 is definitely coming at you, and I've been working hard behind the scenes to come up with some parts and start working through what that looks like. The focus is absolutely going to be on turning this guy into that long range tourer, something that we can do some big Ks with, towing and not towing, but getting out there and taking this thing to some iconic destinations and touring with it over some longer distances. So we're building that out. There's a lot of stuff coming on in the back of the tub there, and that is going to be excellent. I can't wait. I'm developing some products there as well. Can't wait to show you guys that. Some other stuff going on underneath here, maybe even more stuff going on there. I can't wait to show you. There's some good stuff coming, so make sure you subscribed if you haven't already, and I look forward to bringing you some of that content soon. I really want to thank the Patreons of Video Show Me How. The extra little support, guys, does go a long way, and it's those extra little bits that helps me get together the bits and pieces for putting the build together and then working hard to show you guys how to do all of this sort of stuff yourself. So really appreciate, guys. Thanks very much. But other than that, guys, as always, I hope that you have an amazing day, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.